This is the WJW podcast, brought to you by the Washington Jewish Week and Mid-Atlantic Media. Welcome to the WJW podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Trudler, editor of the Washington Jewish Week. I'm joined today by Dr. Clarence Jones. Dr. Jones is a longtime leader in the fight against hate and a staunch advocate for civil rights, who served as a strategic advisor, legal counsel, and speechwriter to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. from 1960 until Dr. King's assassination on April 4th, 1968. Dr. Jones has worked to carry on Dr. King's legacy in the important pursuit of civil rights and equality, and he served as a lawyer, a civil rights leader, and a business executive in the entertainment field. For example, Dr. Jones negotiated the famous Rumble in the Jungle boxing match, which was historic in many ways, between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman in 1974. Dr. Jones serves as chairman of the Spill the Honey Foundation, an organization that is dedicated to Black-Jewish relations. He also founded the Dr. Clarence B. Jones Institute for Social Advocacy, and he was recently featured in a Super Bowl ad from Robert Kraft's Foundation to Combat Anti-Semitism. Dr. Jones, thank you for taking the time to chat.
My pleasure to be with you, sir.
Thank you. So as I just mentioned, you had a relationship with Dr. King and you were close to him. Can you talk a little bit about the front row seat that you had to watch such an impactful leader and a person who literally gave his life to the pursuit of social justice, civil rights, and equality?
Yes. Well, he was an extraordinary individual, and I was 29 and he was 31 when we met. On the subject of relevance to our discussion is that there came a time, and I've said this on many occasions, so what I'm saying to you probably heard or read in other places, but there came a time when I'm somewhat of a provocative person, and I said to Martin, I said, you're the baddest dude I know, extraordinary orator. I've never met anyone so gifted, blah, 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 blah. But I said, let me get real. I said, I have an obligation to speak to you, frankly. Now, this is in 1960, right? Somewhere in 1960, 61, I'm saying to him, I said, Martin, we Negroes, Carl and Carter, so we only constitute 12% of the population. Now, there's no way we can do handstands, jump on our feet, jump up and down, somersaults. There's no way 12% of the population is going to get 88% of the population white, do something it doesn't want to do. Now, you're the greatest orator I've ever met in my life. And I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but there's nothing you can say or do that's going to get 88% of the population to do what it doesn't want to do. So he says, well, Clarence, I'm not sure what you're getting at. I said, what I'm getting at is I'm talking about reality, brother. And so I'm I guess an extroverted person. I don't mind going up to strangers and striking a conversation with them. So on one or more occasions, I don't know whether it was New York. It was not in New York. It was someplace in the South or Midwest. And there was someplace, and I would see these white people demonstrating in support of us. And I would go over to them and I would say, excuse me, why are you doing this? Why are you here with us? And many of them knew who I was. So, you're Attorney Jones. Yes, we know. Well, Attorney Jones, you and your Dr. King should know that the reason we're supporting you is because this is what our grandma and our grandpa would want us to do. So I was a little, I was taken aback. I didn't quite understand. And I said, you see, Dr. Jones, I didn't say Dr. Jones, I said, you see, Attorney Jones, you and your Dr. King should know, you see, my grandpa and grandma, they died in the Holocaust. And I know from what I knew as a young child, I know from their lives that this is what they would want us to do. So that had a profound impact on me. And I thought to myself, I said, Clarence, And I said this to Martin. I said, 100 yards away, all white people look alike. That is, they have different personal characteristics, one from another, but they all look white. But that's not true. There were some of them that are white, but they are distinctly different from other people who are white, and they are Jewish. And let me tell you what those people who are Jewish say to me. And I told them that. And I said, no, I don't want to hurt your feelings, because I know you think that they're coming here because you're such a great orator, but that's not the reason they're here. I mean, they respect your orator, but let me tell you, the reason they're here is not because of you and me. They're here in support of us because that's the way they're paying tribute to their grandparents. And Martin said, are you serious? I said, I'm serious as I can be. And then over the course of the years, the time, my actual real life day-to-day experiences in different parts of the country, in different places, and blah, blah, blah. And particularly at the March on Washington, August 28, 1963. Everybody celebrates, as indeed they should, Martin's speech, the so-called I Have a Dream speech. Yes, I wrote the first 7.5 paragraphs of that speech. I got that. But what people often omit, and I think it's, I wish I had the power to reshift the boat in the water so that they would not just think about Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, but they would think about this person who spoke immediately before Dr. King. And that person was Rabbi Yaakov Prince. Rabbi Yaakov Prince at the time was the president of the American Jewish Congress, one of the sponsoring organizations of the March on Washington. And among the things he said, he spoke immediately before Dr. King was to be introduced. And among the things he said in his speech were several important things, but the thing that I still remember, it's over 60 years. I remember like it was yesterday. And he said, near the end of the speech, he says, when I was a rabbi in Germany under Adolf Hitler, I remember many things. I remember this, I remember that, blah, 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 blah. But the thing that I most remember is the silence of the good people. Well, when he said that, it's like you to have taken a baseball bat and hit it across my stomach. I said, oh my God, the thing that I most remember was the silence of the good people. So therefore, 60 years later, when I'm sitting talking to Robert Kraft, the owners of the Baltimore Patriots, so forth, I mean, I knew who he was in terms of owner of the football team. And we had a conversation, and I said, and we both came to the same conclusion. He says, Dr. Jones, one of the things I see from my side is that there are good people who are silent. I said, oh, I cannot tell you how that rings a bell to me. And I told him about the story, and I said, the challenge we have is that they're stone cold anti-Semites. Forget them. We're not going to reconstruct them. We're not going to reach them. Forget about those people, But the persons we have to be most concerned about, the overwhelming majority of people. I said, I'm going to start with a premise. The overall majority of white people, I don't assume, maybe you have experiences that are different than me, but I don't assume until evidence to the contrary that the overall majority of people, black people, white people, are anti-black or anti-Semitic. Significant segment of them are, but I don't assume that every white person I murder is anti-black or anti-Semitic. I don't do that. I said, but what we face, and Mr. Kraft, as you know, is the owner of the New England Patriots. I said, you're owner of a major football team that's broken my heart too many times. You've defeated some of my favorite teams. I said, what you have your finger on it. Silence is our major problem. And I told him about Rabbi Yaakov Prince, I told him I said, 60 years later, that's still our major problem. I start off the glass is either half empty or half full. I don't start with the assumption that the overwhelming majority of white people in America are racist. I don't start with that. No. I would say there is a lot of historical evidence to suggest that they've had conditioning that would make them more likely than not to become a racist, but I don't assume that on an individual one-on-one basis, they're racist people. I don't assume that. Okay. And I said to Mr. Kraft, I said, the thing that's so brilliant about you is that you're challenging them. And I said, I want to find a way of challenging them too. Because I said, I think that that Yaakov Prince, he was very perceptive. Yes, there are stone cold racist fascists in this country who hate Jews. I got that. But that doesn't define the majority of America. That does not define the majority of America. It regrettably defines a significant segment of America. I don't know how many that is, but that's just the reality. But the glass is either half full or half empty. And I believe the glass is half full. And I believe that you, Mr. Kraft, you've come up with you have the resources, and maybe working together, we can make a difference. And I think I welcome, I didn't realize, it's really funny. I said to my chief of staff, I said, maybe the good word, common sense has a way of traveling. I've never become so popular. I've been saying things. I'm saying things for the past 60 years. I'm not saying anything different. I'm the same Clarence. I mean, I've gotten older. I'm 93 years of age. But on this issue, okay, I'm a retired professor, but I teach the history of part of the civil rights movement. I let people know there's no way in hell, as brilliant as Dr. King was in terms of, quote, leading the civil rights movement, there's no way we could have done this without the alliance and support of the Jewish community. It just would not have happened. And I am still amazed that people don't know this. And so I figured that Clarence, there must be a reason why you're being blessed with longevity. You still have to tell people today who may not remember that the reason we made this fundamental transition from the period of enforced segregation across the majority of the country to the kind of country we have today is because we were able to break down that barrier. And when I say we didn't do it. I mean, Martin King was the baddest living person I'd ever known in my lifetime. But I let him know, and I want the world to know, as bad as that brother was, we could not have done it without the alliance of the Jewish community. That's why I say all white people look alike. But of that segment of white people, I tell every place I go, I don't mean for white people, other white people who are not Jewish to be offended, but I simply have to tell you what the historical facts are. I can't not tell you what the facts are. And the facts are, we wouldn't be the country we are today, but for the alliance of the Black community and the Jewish community that made this country what it is today.
You said something very striking to me, that August 1963 speech from Dr. King, which I think many people consider to be one of the most memorable and impactful speeches of all time. And your primary takeaway from that day was Rabbi Prince, who preceded Dr. King, and
that's right.
What he said, that strikes a chord with me.
Right.
I want to pick up on something you said, because I thought a lot about this, clearly not as much as you, because you're living and breathing it every day, but the Jewish and Black communities did join together at that time during the civil rights movement. And I think, like you said, because there were Jews who said, their grandparents would want us to be here. And Jews understand what it means to be targeted and hated in different capacities. And I think they them standing together with the Black community was, like you said, a very important step in moving and advancing equal rights. As I look at it now, it seems that so many years later, that bond has frayed a little bit.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I know you've dedicated yourself, whether it be through your work as chair of Spill the Honey Foundation and other capacities, to improving education and awareness throughout different communities. I'll tell you honestly, several years ago, I had the opportunity to visit the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, and at the site of the former Lorraine Motel where
Right,
Dr.
right.
was assassinated. And for me, it was a very educational and enlightening experience. And I know you focus a lot on education. What sort of things could be done or should we be doing to better, repair, let's call it, and strengthen the bonds between the Black and Jewish communities?
I'm going to go back to something that I used, the Rabbi. I'm going to go back to the mandate that Rabbi Yaakov Prince said. We have to break the silence. It's interesting when Dr. King gave a speech opposing the war in Vietnam, the title of the speech was Time to Break the Silence. Now, on what's happening, for example, can anybody who has a half of a brain in their head, if you have half of a brain in their head, yeah, I know there can be political differences. I mean, my God, in Israel there are political differences. But can there really be a question that what happened to Israel on October 7th was the greatest atrocity of my lifetime? Can anybody, is that questionable? Is that questionable? Is there any way you can give a millionth of an inch of justification for that? I don't give a damn what your opinion is about Israel and the Palestinians and so forth on that sole single question. Israel's minding its own business. Israel, perfect state? Absolutely not. United States, perfect state? Absolutely not. But how can somebody, even for one moment, not for an instance of a second, question that Israel has to do what it has to do to defend itself against this atrocity? You know what? Because of the limited history I know, some countries, some people have choices. I know enough about the history that say Israel doesn't have a choice. You understand? If Israel doesn't do what it has to do to defend itself, that's the end of Israel. Let's just talk bluntly. Okay? So we on this side, outside of Israel, can have some differences with the tactics they do. They shouldn't do this, that. Okay. Reasonable people can differ, but there can be no differences in how you have to stamp out and destroy the efforts to destroy Israel. Now, my record is clear. I've always been part of a two-state solution. I've always favored and still favor the fact that I can be such a strong supporter of Israel doesn't mean that I also can't say to my Israeli friends, I say to my Jewish friends, we've got to deal in reality. But I also understand that you can't deal in the reality that I want you to deal with unless you survive. You understand? You can't talk about a two-state solution if there's no other state, if the state of Israel doesn't exist. I got that. Okay? So this is why I try to talk to some knuckleheads today. I said, hold on now. I understand. You don't like that Israel hasn't done this, and I don't like that they have done this first. But let's deal in stages. You can't deal with the Palestinian question if there's no Israel to deal with the Palestinians. You know what I'm saying? You can't talk about a two-state solution if the state that you want to have a solution with doesn't exist. Okay. Okay, so that's all I'm saying. So some people say, well, you seem so pro-Israeli. I said, well, I don't know what that means, pro-Israeli. I'm just pro-reality. I haven't changed my position. I have people who know me. I will tell my Jewish friends, my Israeli friends, at the end of the day, you're not going to have any peace unless, in my opinion, you can disagree with me. You can say, we love you, Dr. Jones, but you don't know. So that's fine, fine. You ask my opinion, I will tell you that the long-term, the intermediate long-term solution, you got to find a way of existing with the Palestinians, but you cannot. And I am not urging anybody, I don't want anybody to misinterpret my remarks. I am not suggesting that anybody negotiate or give 1/4 to Hamas, 1/4. And I think something very, I'm chairman of the board of Spill the Honey Foundation, so we're nonprofit, we're non-political, but I'm also a professor. And so I'm now beginning to say more often, there's no way that Hamas could have pulled that off without Iran. I'm just looking, I'm an analytical person, okay? And so I believe at the end of the day, Israel and the United States are going to have to face up to a very difficult situation. You think Hamas is able to do that by itself? No. No, don't tell me. I'm not, I know politics too well. And, but for our purposes, you tell your supporters, this is one 93-year-old Black man who had the luxury, I'll call it a luxury and a privilege, of working with one of the greatest Black persons in the history of our country, Martin Luther King Jr. And this is one instance in which I always am very careful and cautious. I don't say, well, Dr. King's not alive, and he wouldn't, and so I'm reluctant to what he would or would not say. But in this case, I'm not reluctant. I can tell you without reservation that when I say what I say, this is exactly what Martin King would say also.
Well, it's interesting, Dr. Jones, because Dr. King famously and eloquently said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," and that
Oh
applies.
yeah, right.
That applies in the the discussion we're having today and so many other facets of our society. And coupled with your glass half full approach, I wish more people would think that way, because I think we'd be in a much better place as a society and as a people for that. One other thing I just want to pick up on before we close, and you mentioned silence a couple times from Rabbi Prince and how that's come up in different ways.
Right.
So and you mentioned Robert Kraft and the work that he's doing at the Foundation to Combat Anti-Semitism. So the Super Bowl commercial during Super Bowl 58 that was seen by, I think it was 123 million people watched that Super Bowl, most watched television program in US history.
I know. Imagine this old 93-year-old person. I can't walk down the street now. I have to sort of look out. Apparently everybody watches the Super Bowl. Strangers come up to me and I said, I saw you in a commercial.
Right. Yeah. But that now famous commercial focused on anti-Semitism and the topic of how the silence of people's silence helps enables hate of others.
That is correct.
And it's a very poignant point. And I wonder what you think could be done. Obviously, the Super Bowl commercial is what it is, and you've become a celebrity, even though you were already one before. But the idea of remaining silent and just kind of sitting idly by, sitting on your hands while all these things are unfolding before our very eyes,
you've just described the condition. You've just described the condition of immorality.
Mm-hmm.
What you've just described is the condition of immorality. If you remain silent, if you sit on your hands, if you do nothing in the obvious face of anti-Semitism, for example, today, if you do it in the face of racism, if you do it in the face of people who are homophobic, if you do it in the face of people who have problems with, I don't know, old people, whatever it is, okay? I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a human race. I don't agree. Just because I advocate or support the right of a group to have the same rights as I have doesn't mean that I want to be a member of that group. I mean, some of my friends say to me, some of my Jewish friends to me, my Black friends to me, say, Clarence, you know what? You sound like you're Jewish. I said, well, I guess I am. I don't know how to put it any other way than my 93-year-old journey convinces me, and I thought I knew a lot until I recalled Rabbi Joachim Prince, and then until I encountered Robert Kraft of the New England Patriots. Independent of me, I only know Robert Kraft as a owner of a football team that broke my heart so many times, defeating teams that I suppose. So this is a bad dude. Robert Kraft, I don't know. I know more about him now than I did before, but he's had an independent journey that's brought him to a position that's similar to mine. And we never met until maybe 2 months ago. And he's come to the same conclusion as I have, that in the face of anti-Semitism, and he comes to the same conclusion with respect to racism, the crucial problem is silence. It's the silence of the good people that enables anti-Semitism to flourish. It's the silence of the good people that enables racism, anti-blackness to flourish. And I'm saying, I look at it from the historical point of view. I take no quarter on this. I don't take a backseat to anybody. President, street sweeper. I know how we came to be the way we are today. How did that happen? Because of the alliance between what we were then called Negro, the alliance between the Negro and Jewish community enabled America to be what it is today. That is unchallengeable. That is historically beyond reproach.
Dr. Jones, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Really appreciate it.
No, my honor, sir.